All right, I'm gonna invite you, Lydia. Okay.
Hello.
Hi,
How are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for the taking the time to do this.
No
Um,
problem.
Now, like some different people, I came across your stuff on here, and I was wondering. Well, I'll just let you introduce yourself for people who may not know who you are.
Okay. My name is Lydia Des Dolles. I am the creator of Fight Connect TV, which is a combat sports platform, media platform. I'm also the host of the First Exchange podcast, which is a audiovisual podcast that is more like a conversation that documents the journey of fighters, coaches, influential members of the fighting community. I'm also the media director for One Empire Management, One Empire Media, and Empire Fight Store, which is the sister companies of Empire Pro Tape, which is a glove tape company that you will see on any professional fighter. They wrap their hands in this glove tape. So I've been doing this for about 6, 7 years. I'm Irish, and I've just recently relocated to the UK. So this is my new home, and I'm currently in my studio, which is the First Exchange.
Now, you said you've been doing it for about 6 or 7 years. I
Yeah,
always like to ask people, like, do you remember where you were and maybe roughly when it was that you kind of got your first exposure to this kind of sport?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can remember it like as if it was yesterday. But um, yeah, I done music. I was in a band for many years in my 20s, and I finished up doing music when I was about 29, 30. And I was kind of lost. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I had to kind of figure out who I was and what I was passionate about. And I started training jiu-jitsu, which is a grappling-based martial arts. If you follow MMA or the UFC, you will know what that is. And through jiu-jitsu, I met people who were kind of obviously involved in the fight industry. I started attending shows. I started working for an MMA promotion called BAMA, which is now Bellator Europe. And at the time, I had to do their social media and document a lot of stuff that was going backstage. I also had to do a lot of work with fighters, like, bringing them to media days, bringing them to open workouts, booking them into their hotels. So I kind of had to do a lot of stuff where I was working with fighters in fight camps and in fight week and on fight week. And I just sort of got into that sort of kind of flow of doing those, fight camps, fight weeks. And I was like, why doesn't anyone properly document or show this in sort of like a, almost like a quick fix kind of way in terms of like social media? Like social media content is so quick, fast paced, but there's loads of opportunity to cover the sports in really good ways. Um, and so I just started like Snapchatting, Instagramming, like doing little videos at shows. Like I just buy a ticket for an MMA show or a boxing show. I go by my own on a Saturday night. I'd sit in like the front row. I just film little behind the scenes bits, and it very quickly turned into, people would message me, oh, are you going to be at this show? Can you make sure you get the main events, like cover a little bit of the main event? Or did you see what happened in that fight in the second round? So there was kind of like this, I don't know, I suppose like a niche or a market for people who wanted a certain type of content and that weren't getting it. And it just developed over the years to the more people that were interested in Fight Connect TV, the more people that wanted to see the content. It just kept growing and growing until it got to the stage where I was able to leave my full-time job. I was able to dedicate myself to it 100%. And yeah, this is where we've ended up. It's like 6 years later, which is really a short period of time if you look at kind of what I've done in that space. But I only kind of feel now like I'm sort of beginning in my career and things. So it's been very interesting.
So I have a question, like, because this is what you do for a living. Who was the first person that you connected with as far as like doing work for this person?
That's a good question. I think with people that I work with, in terms of maybe not to throw away interviews from like post-fight interviews, because that's sort of like when I'm hired by a promotion or by someone to go to a show, it's sort of in the contract that I would interview their fighters or what way it would work. But when I used to do the documentary series, or I'd follow people around for an extended period of time, it was really very important that when I liked the person, I got on with them, and that they were a certain type of person that was going to be easy to work with, you know, because you're spending a lot of time with these people. Sometimes you're staying in their house, you're traveling with them. You've seen them in times where, you know, it's like they're at their most vulnerable in fight camp and different things. So with that, probably an Irish Muay Thai fighter called Craig Coakley. He's been a professional in terms of Muay Thai and Ireland. He's one of the top Muay Thai fighters. He's been on the European circuit. He's fought for many years. Muay Thai, unfortunately, is not as big as MMA. One championship now are obviously highlighting MMA, kickboxing, Muay Thai. They're trying to put more focus on the sport, but the big Muay Thai promotions, Muay Thai Grand Prix, Yokow, they're still not at the level of boxing or, you know, Matchroom, Frank Warren, and these big boxing promoters. So there's still a lot of work to do in terms of the fighters getting the recognition that they need to get or they deserve to get. So with Craig, it was kind of that thing of I saw how hard he worked, saw, you know, him be disappointed by the sport, be let down by management at times, be let down by promoters at times, and I just felt that he had a really good story. So he's someone now who I would, you know, consider a very close friend. But essentially I didn't know him when we started working together, but I saw that there was something in him that would help me to kind of, I suppose, capture him in a certain way. So probably him.
What I mean is, were you like more like a freelancer who was working for different promotions, or were you kind of working for yourself, sort of?
I was always working for myself, so it was always Fight Connect TV. And what would happen, you know, eventually was not at the start, obviously, because I had to, you know, create the brand and get off the ground. But eventually what had happened was I would be hired by promoters to come to their show. So it would be on a show by show basis. And some promoters would kind of, I would have that contract where they would say, you know, you'll cover all our shows for 6 months or 12 months. And no matter where it was, I would go and I would do the kind of Fight Connect TV package, which was, you know, maybe a documentary in the lead up to the fight, you know, promoting the fight in the lead up, then being at the event, covering the weigh-ins, covering the media week, at the event, doing like a 360 degree view of kind of what's going on, you know, and just giving the viewer that's at home, on their mobile or on their laptop, a different angle or a different approach to what was happening, and letting them see or being able to see a different side of the fighter or backstage of a promotion or whatever it might be. So yeah, that's kind of how it started in terms of me being in an established brand, in terms of me getting that kind of popularity. From that, then my own kind of profile started to rise. I you know, done a TV show in Ireland, that was similar to the I don't know if in the States you probably don't have it, but it's kind of like The View, I suppose, or Loose Women, that kind of a thing. It's like a panel of women, and it's all topics and it's all controversial, and it's, you know, giving your opinion. So stuff like that was amazing, that I was able to come from an independent combat sports media and to be given airtime on like a national broadcaster and stuff. So it's been really cool.
When you started out your Fight Connect TV, was it just you only?
Yes, it was. It was just me. And over the years when we started out, there was, you know, it became very difficult to self-shoot because of the nature of what I do at shows. I'm backstage, I'm in dressing rooms, I'm filming warm-ups, and then I'm shooting to go do a post-fight interview, then I'm at the front getting a walkout. So there's loads of interaction, there's loads of content that's being constantly shot. So it became really difficult to do it all myself. And then I started hiring, you know, videographers, photographers, and they were all great, really skilled at what they done, but they didn't or weren't able to have the same vision that I had, you know, like I have dedicated my life to this for since I've started it. Weekends, no days off. When I was working full time, I would finish work. Sometimes I would do editing in my jobs, like secretly at my laptop, like, you know, wherever I could work and do it, I would. And it became like an obsession to me, and I knew that there was so much opportunity and that I wanted to grow. And unfortunately, unless someone shares your vision and is willing to work as hard as you need them to work or equal to you, it'll never be a right fit. And I never found that team that could work with me until I partnered with Empire and the different brands that came with that. So it's been interesting.
So now you feel like maybe you've got someone that you can do it with that maybe
Yeah,
won't.
absolutely. Absolutely. When, you know, when I met the team that we have here at Empire, it would have been a many years ago. And they originally started sponsoring Fight Connect TV. So Dean Sheriff, who's the chairman, he was like, look, I love what you do. I want to support you. How can I? And I said, if you can financially sponsor me so that, you know, I can be able to do this, I suppose, you know, full time or as much, give it as much dedication as I can. He says, yeah, of course. And this was like 3 years ago. So he says now that he knew when he met me 3 years ago, or saw we hadn't actually met each other in real life. He just saw what I'd done online, that he would have a place for me down the line for his vision, which has become what we know now as the Empire brands, which is Empire Fight Store, One Empire Management, One Empire Media, which Fight Connect TV and the First Exchange podcast are under. So in that, there's myself, media director Jamie Sheldon, who is a cutman. He's been a cutman for 20 years. He's worked with some of the biggest names in boxing, in MMA. He's the on the management side of things, and then Nicola is the managing director for the Fight Store. So together, we all kind of work together under the Empire banner, and I feel so grateful and so lucky that I stuck to my passion and stayed true to myself and just had faith that everything would pay off one day, and I would be in a position where I will be able to do this full time and be financially able to do it and support it, and it is worked out, thankfully.
So you feel like the sport in the UK and Ireland was big enough to where you could pursue this as something, as a
Yeah,
career?
100%, 100%. Always, from the very first time that I started working in sport, I knew that there was a window of opportunity in so many different directions, and it actually frustrated me that other people couldn't see it. Many people said to me over the years that you're really talented, you're really good at what you do, you're just wasting your time in combat sports, there's no money in it, there's only a small percentage of people who do anything, or who reap the benefits of the industry. And I just refused to believe it. And there was times where I questioned many times if this was right for me and if the struggle was worth it. I was in music for many years, and that was another industry that was so hard to crack and so hard to do anything really big. And there is only a 1% that go on to be really successful. But that's the nature of combat sports as well. Not every fighter is given a promise that they're going to be successful or that it's going to work out for them. And some dedicate 10 years, 20 years of that to their craft and still end up having to work a 9-to-5 job at the end of it. So it is that thing of you just have to believe in yourself, and you have to, essentially weather the storm, if that would be the case.
How many, I know you probably can't think of off the top of your, but maybe like overall, how many people told you not to pursue?
Uh,
Was it a big number or a small number?
no. It wasn't a big number. There's a handful of people.
Okay.
And I remember each and every one of them. I'll never forget it, because I think about, when I make my first million, or when I have any more landmark moments in the sport, they're the people I think of instantly. And it's, I just think not oh, I told you, it's like a thing for me. It's like, remember when and look at what's happening now. And it's just a reminder to never give up on yourself, never lose faith in what you believe is your true calling and what can happen. Like anything you set your mind to is possible, you know. It is that thing of, if you can see it in your mind, then you can achieve it in real life. But now the time has gone on, you know, a lot of people who told me I wouldn't make money in this sport worked in the same field as me, you know. So you do have to question on whether they do truly think you're not going to do anything in sport, or are they just concerned that you're going to do a little bit better than them. So that is something that you have to factor in as well, you know.
Yeah. You know, I was around the sport from the beginning, so I saw a lot of people that were just doing it on their own, and really they would pay to get tickets to whatever, the UFC or smaller events. So your story is kind of similar in a way to many people that that you see in the U.S. that are doing it now. I do want to ask you, and I'm sure lots of people have asked you about Conor McGregor, like, since you're from Ireland,
Yes.
maybe give me your impression of all that stuff. Like, have you ever met him or those guys? Or
Yes, I have. Yeah, I've met Conor quite a few times. We would have lived quite near each other when I lived in Dublin. Yeah, listen, you know, what he's done for MMA, not only Irish MMA, but what he's done for MMA has been, you know, I don't think we'll ever see it replicated to that degree again. I don't think there'll ever be anyone like him. You know, he put Irish sports on the map. The only other person who I think came close to doing that was Katie Taylor. Conor would agree, and many would agree, that Casey probably, not probably, has done more in terms of achievements within a sport. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, whether it's because she's female, whether it's because she's Irish, whether it's because she's quite, you know, back at that time, she wasn't maybe as media savvy as the press needed her to be. But with Conor, he knew how to play the game, still does. And, you know, no one can take away, I know these last few years, you know, the kind of outside of fighting antics that have gone on, you know, no one wants to see that happen, especially to someone that we've held in such a high regard. And I think everyone, you know, just wants to remember the really good times in that we felt that sort of pride when he was taking over, you know, winning belts and having all these amazing stoppages, and, you know, showing that Irish people have a fighting spirit, and that, you know, there's a reason why people say they're fighting Irish. So I don't think anyone could ever take away, you know, what he's achieved in his own life, in the UFC, excuse me, and in the sport.
now, MMA in Ireland,
Excuse me.
how big is it?
I won't say that it is, you know, it's definitely not at the level of being a national sport. It's getting closer, and we just had junior IMAF World Champions, so that's the amateur World Championships. Nadine Abbott, she's a young atomweight MMA fighter from Dublin. She just won her first world title. Excuse me. And you know, her generation that are going to MMA after school on the weekends, looking at MMA as a potential career, that is all a direct response to Conor and what he done in the sport. You know, no one can argue that. Without him, I don't think that there would be as many MMA academies as there is in Ireland now. It's still not the same as football academies, or we've a sport in Ireland called hurling, which is like everyone has a stick essentially called a hurley, and you have a slitter, which is a ball, and you have to get it from one end to the other, you know. It's a really old Irish sport. That's probably with rugby, excuse me, in terms of, you know, popular sports. But MMA is definitely has been on the rise, and is still on the rise, along with jiu-jitsu, along with like more martial arts. Whereas we would have kind of seen karate judo, taekwondo. They were kind of been the kind of leading martial arts over the years. But yeah, MMA is not where it deserves to be in Ireland. It's still not a government recognised sport. I think not until that happens, or until that happens, we won't see it have the sort of popularity as some of the bigger sports.
I want to ask you about kind of like your memories of Conor rising up. Maybe just take me over what you remember of all that.
Um,
In Ireland, obviously, yeah.
yeah. I remember. It's so long ago, but it feels like it wasn't that long ago, if that makes sense. But I just remember, you know, lots of people talking about this fighter who, you know, was selling out venues. At the time, obviously, he would have been fighting with Cage Warriors. This is all pre UFC. And Cage Warriors would have come to a venue in Dublin called the Helix. And it's where Conor kind of had some of his most memorable fights. And even prior to that, you know, these are the days where he would have had his professional debut in like a community centre, 150 people there, you know, like just madness, really, you know, like in terms of how the sport has grown in that short period of time. When you look back at, you know, his earlier fights, kind of like, you know, it looks so raw, I suppose, when you look at it. But the days when he was in Cage Warriors and he was fighting in the Helix, and there was a little bit of a buzz that was kind of going on in terms of, you know, this new fighter got a bit of a boxing background, comes from Crumlin, you know, he's going to do something in the sport. But at the time, you know, no one had really, you know, done anything. You know, there was a couple of guys like Neil Seary and, you know, Paul Redmond and all these people that were kind of floating around and, you know, taking fights and stuff. But no one, when they heard of Conor, no one really looked at him, although he was good and sold tickets and was exciting and stopping people and stuff. No one really looked at him and went, he's going to be a global superstar or a global icon. You know, but I think it was just because no one had done that before in that kind of way. And yeah, I remember when he did sign to the UFC, and, you know, there was all this talk, oh, Conor have to sign to the UFC. Oh, he's still on the dole. You know, he was still getting dole, which is like social welfare payments, you know, 200 quid a week, fighting for a couple. I think he was a couple of fights into the UFC. He was still getting his dole, you know. But yeah, it was just a really exciting time. And then as soon as he got to the UFC, and as soon as he, you know, I think maybe after the Brazil fight, maybe I think that might have been after that fight that people kind of went, you know, I think it was the iconic night in the Points, or in the O2 3 Arena, I think it was at the time. It's changed now to the O2 venue, but the night that Paddy Houlihan, Neil Seary, Conor was on the card. Aisling Daly wasn't on the card. I think she really regrets not being on that. Who was the other fighter that was on it? He's like a token Irish, but I think he's can't remember. It'll come to me in a second. But yeah, so that night I think was like a really iconic night for Irish MMA, because I think that everyone sort of said, okay, there's a really good lineup, a really good talent pool of Irish fighters here who might actually do something. And they were all signed to the biggest organisation in MMA at the time, you know. So I remember that time just being really exciting, and it was really a proud time for everyone. I think my generation, my age group, were kind of a little bit too young to experience the big boxing days. You know, the iconic, the Steve Collins days, the Barry McGuigan, you know, the boxers who sold out venues in Ireland. We kind of missed that. We were kind of on the back end of it. So there was no fight star, you know, around that time that was doing anything massive or huge that we could kind of all get behind. So Conor was the first, he filled all those voids for us, you know, that there was now a superstar that we could get behind. And I think everyone started to believe it then when he started getting the stoppages and the wins that he got in the UFC.
Now, in Ireland, how big was the response? Was it as big as maybe it looked like in Vegas, where it's just tons of people are all into this?
Yeah, like it was definitely one of those things where I don't know, it's hard to explain. In Ireland, football is huge, or soccer as you call it. And the only kind of memorable thing that I could pin it to was Ireland made the quarterfinals of the World Cup in 1994.
Hmm.
And, 10 years later, 15 years later, people were still, hanging on to Ireland in the quarterfinal of the World Cup. It was such a historic, memorable time. Um, a woman called Sonia O'Sullivan won gold medal in running for Ireland. There's all these kind of historical moments that happen in Irish sport, but nothing had happened for a very long time. And yeah, it was like, culturally, I think when he fought, it was like, pubs would stay open late. People would go to each other's houses to like get the pay-per-view, staying up till 4, 5, 6 in the morning, people out running on the streets when he won titles, all that kind of stuff. I just remember it being a really exciting time, and everyone was proud. Everyone was proud, and anyone who was a fan of fighting, whether it be boxing, MMA, Muay Thai, karate, whatever it was, everyone kind of came together, which was a really, really lovely thing to see.
And it must have been great for you because you're covering the sport at this time, right? So it's perfect for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like, as I kind of started doing things or working in the sports after a couple of years, new opportunities started opening up because radio shows and, maybe TV shows or news channels, whatever it might be, when he was fighting, they always wanted to have someone come on and be a little bit of a, you know, to talk about him, talk about the fight, what can we expect, is he going to win, a couple of minutes here and there. So everyone that was involved in the sport got it kind of a bit back, if you were good, which I was. So there was loads of opportunities on the back of him doing that. So that's why it was so, we were all so proud of him, and we were all so happy that he was carrying us and the sport on his back.
Now, how hard was it for you to move to the UK?
Not very hard at all. It was a very easy decision, which was primarily led to, where I was in my life, where I wanted to be, what I believed that I could achieve, and then the opportunity. So it's kind of a hard work opportunity. It all kind of came together. The offer to become part of Empire, to become part of the vision that Dean had for his company, was too hard to pass up. It was kind of one of those things of, if I wasn't going to make the move and I wasn't going to take the opportunity, then I needed to leave the sports and I needed to move on and do something very different. It was that simple. But he literally had a one foot. I decided to move here before ever having met him. I never met him before. We spoke on the phone all the time, video calling, all that, but I never actually met him. I never met any of the team. Where I am now, I'd never visited. I never knew, what the city looked like. And I'm in a small town outside of a larger, I'm outside of Sheffield, but I'm in a small town, small village. And that's where our offices are, that's where my studio is, where our base is. So he had a call and he was like, this is my vision. I want you to be a part of it. But you have to move to the UK and it has to be, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so. And I just hung up the phone and I said, yeah, I just texted him. I said, I'm gone. And I, left my house, left my family, my friends, my gyms that I trained at, my dogs. I'd left everything to come and do this. But although the opportunity is so huge and I love it, and I think it is the best decision I've ever made, I definitely have sacrificed a lot to be here and to do it. But it has to be done. Unfortunately, in life, you don't get to have this life and also get to be comfortable and have no sacrifice. So it's just part of the vision.
Now, now that you bring that up, like I'd like to, because the stuff you've been telling me, like I said, there's so much similarities to people I knew in the 90s, when the sport was kind of first. And maybe talk about some of the sacrifices and some of the difficult moments you've had trying to do this stuff.
Yeah, there's been a lot, there's definitely more positives than there is negatives. Otherwise I wouldn't still be here. But I've definitely, I've done this for 7 years. It's only in the last 6-7 months that I've become part of a team where I have a network of people who are kind of on the journey with me now. And I feel a little bit more protected, in terms of the sport and protected in what maybe, goes on. And it's a rootless industry, it's not, when you read all the stories about boxing, when you read all the stories about like the Don Kings, the Dana Whites, all these characters that people have such an opinion on, like, that's not a fairy tale. It is a very, for all the brilliantness that's in fight sports, there is a lot of negativity in terms of, it's cutthroat and people can be two-faced, deals can fall apart at the last minute, people can steal your ideas. Like, there's so much of that stuff that goes on. There's people who tell you that you're not going to do anything, that you're not right for this, you're not right for that. So all that stuff goes on. But I came from the music industry and it goes on there as well. It's just, anything that is entertainment, anything that is sport, anything that is kind of, those industries, it's cutthroat and it's a business at the end of the day. So the stuff like that was kind of hard for me at the start to understand that it was a business. Do not take anything personal. It's not about you, So all the little things that you learn to go on, not a lot will faze me now, I have moments, don't get me wrong, where, stuff falls through or projects don't come to fruition. I do have moments where I'm like, I can get a little bit upset over it, but there's nothing too bad. Let's just say that. But you do run into stumbling blocks, and you do run into people who will try and stop you progressing, no matter what areas it is, or different things. But I try to just stay as pure as possible and focus on myself and trust that everything will work out.
Which do you feel is more cutthroat? The kind of like the media community or the sport?
The media community or the sports? That's
Or is it one big bubble?
I think it's
maybe?
a melting pot. There's not, I wouldn't sit here and say that, media is awful, because that is not the case at all. It's not necessarily the area, it's to do with the people who are involved in it. And as always, why are people I suppose it goes with greed a lot of the time in a certain capacity, because why are people doing this? The majority of people who are in combat sports are doing this to get paid. Fighters are in it to get paid. Promoters are in it to get paid. Management everyone wants to get paid. So it's when that's when it gets interesting. When there's money involved. It's money is the root of all evil. That's why they say it. And part of the reason why I decided to join Empire and came on board with this vision was that, thankfully, money is not the issue here. What is at the core of Empire and what we do, whether it's the fight store element or the media element, it's the fighter, it's the sport, it's the legacy, it's telling the story, it's being creative, it's being entertaining, it's it's where fighting meets culture, or where combat meets culture, as I like to say. So it's not that thing of, we have to get this, we have to get that because we need to get paid. So in the context of media, you know, my style of interview is just a relaxed conversation. There's no clickbait. There's no making the fighter uncomfortable. There's no trying to get gossip. There's no trying to get juice. And I probably pay for that in terms of views, but I know that in the long term, it will pay off because I'm establishing relationships with fighters. They're trusting me. They're, you know, everyone is a little bit more relaxed because they know that you're not going to sell them out when you do an interview or for whatever. So that is more important to me. Whereas I know that other people have to clickbait. They have to have the big capital headlines. They have to, you know, blow things out of proportion because they have to get the views. They have to get the revenue because they have to pay their bills. So that's why I'm so blessed that I don't have to worry about that. And I just get to be relaxed and to tell people stories in the way that I want.
Like when you mentioned maybe there were some people who might have tried to stop you from progressing.
Yeah.
I would always think that's on the media side because who would see you as kind of like an obstacle? Other people in the media.
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't, I try to support everybody as best that I can, and help anyone who needs my help. But yeah, I think, you know, it's like you can break it down to basic like psychology in that, you know, I don't like that person. Why? Oh, she's this, she's that. Oh, she's, you know. But when you look at the root of it, probably like because they're jealous, probably because they don't feel that they're doing well themselves. You know, probably they feel they're lacking in some area, and that's how they, you know, that's how they outpour. You know, there's always a lot of gossip in these industries as well. You know, rumors and all this kind of stuff. You know, it's just in the nature of the business. But I don't really like to focus on it. I am passionate about what I do. I dedicate all my time to it. But the people who are in my life in terms of my friends, my social network, they're not involved in the sports. They have no interest in it. They love me. They support me. They're happy for me. But that's where it ends, you know. How's work? Really good. Okay, what will we order? You know, that's it. So there's no, I kind of get in, do my job, and then I leave.
Maybe it's because you're opinionated enough to be on a show like the View.
Yeah.
Is that true of you? Are you more
Yes.
opinionated?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm extremely opinionated. Yeah, I'm very opinionated. I have no problem saying things as they are.
yeah.
I'm probably a little bit too opinionated. You know, my people here will probably say just I have an opinion on everything. But I'm a perfectionist when it comes to my work and what I do, and I question everything. Not just in work, in my personal life, I question everything. I have a question for everything. But yeah, I have opinions, but I'm open-minded with my opinions, you know, in whatever that is. But then I'm open-minded, you know, if in a work sphere, I'm open-minded. I'll hear your opinion, and if I really truly believe that what I'm doing is, or my way is best, I will say that, you know, and that's probably something as well that you're not taught is, you know, you have to have a certain confidence as well when you get to a certain level within media or whatever, I suppose, whatever role that you're in. But for me, you know, in media, this is an industry, this fighting, you know, fight life or fighting industry is male dominated. And it's changing. There are more women that are starting to come up in all different departments, whether it's presenting, whether it's production, whether it's promotion, management, whatever it is. We are starting to see the role of women increase. But you do have to, you know, it's a very delicate, how would I say it? Like, you have to be very aware that you're female in a male-dominated sport. So you kind of, it's a fine line of being confident, being assertive, sticking to your guns, but also not threatening the man. It's a fine art. So when you're kind of navigating through the sport and you can maybe come across certain characters who are a little bit older, who believe that maybe women shouldn't be in this sport, that women, don't understand the sport, or it's a bit of a boys' club. You have to be a bit delicate with, not taking offense to that and just getting on doing your job and understanding that, not to be offended by it, but understand that times are changing and this person hasn't maybe caught up to that yet. Thankfully, I don't really experience a lot of that, but I do have friends, I do have people that, colleagues in the industry who have come across or up against different stuff like that. So I think it's kind of like being aware of it, knowing that it's changing, and just being really grateful that, things are changing, I suppose.
How much experience do you have, like, with the American MMA community? Is most of it on your side, or do you have some experience with some of the people that we see covering the sport in America?
What do you mean? Do you mean like in terms of the people in the industry, or
the media side of the industry? Yeah.
Yeah, not a lot.
Okay.
I don't. America is such a big market to us over here. It's like, even in terms of covering the sport, it's such a massive market. And you could kind of like solely focus on America. That's how big the market is over there. You wouldn't have to worry about the UK or Europe or Ireland. So right now, my experience with the American market, with media and different things, it really is only when it kind of crosses over to Europe or the UK or Ireland. But yeah, I'm looking forward to when I do get to cross over and work with more people. The only thing I will say is I do have beef with Ariel Helwani. He used a video of mine of Molly McCann that I shot, and he put it on his show. I'm sure it's his producer, not actually him, but he put it on a show and he didn't credit me. And I tweeted him, I was like, you know how this media stuff works, the biggest MMA platform globally. I was like, don't use someone's content without actually crediting them. So I await Ariel Helwani's apology.
Oh, so he never said, "Hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that."
No, he aired me. Yeah, he completely blacked me.
Wow. Why do you think he did that?
Huh?
Why did he do that, you think?
I'm sure he didn't see the tweet. I only tweeted him. I'm sure he missed it. I mean, he gets tweeted by millions of people. I'm sure he missed it, but I'll see him one day. I'll bring it back up again.
So most of your experiences that you've talked about as far as good and bad are all kind of primarily in the UK and stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's where I've spent, that's where I've done my that's where I've worked. It started in Ireland, now it's the UK, and then obviously Europe was sort of like a byproduct of covering both.
How many people? Well, let me rephrase. How many people are doing it that are highly visible like you in the UK, and that just generally?
That are kind of doing the same job.
Yes.
Do you mean women?
Just in general, how many you think? Like, is it hundreds or less?
I wouldn't say it's hundreds. I wouldn't say there's hundreds, but there's definitely a few. There's probably the circuit, when you go around the circuit and like you look at, who's doing what and where, there's usually probably about 20 or 30 that are always at the same shows, who always kind of do the circuit. Then there's the kind of the MMA side, then there's a boxing side, and then sometimes there's a little crossover. People, there's maybe a smaller minority of people like me who, 1 week will be at a Muay Thai show and the next will be at a boxing show, and then, I still like to do amateur stuff. I still like to do kind of grassroots, more community-based stuff. I haven't had a chance to do a lot with everything that we've started with launching over here. But that's definitely something that I am passionate about and I will go back to, is, covering the younger people in the sport and covering people who, started really young and they're on this kind of trajectory and they're at that really important crossroads in their career or their lives where they get to decide whether they want to go on and be a professional fighter, or do they just want to go to college or go on the session or whatever it might be.
Now, as we're kind of winding down the interview, I want to give you a chance to people that are watching this. Maybe you could tell them something that's important or what you're doing, maybe where they could follow you, that kind of stuff.
What's important? I suppose the launch of Empire Fight Store is probably the most important thing that's going on at the moment. Our new website just got launched. It's empirefightstore.com. Check it out. Have a look at all our products that we have on there. You can find content on Fight Connect TV. Also, the First Exchange podcast is available on YouTube to watch. And then also you can just have the audio on Spotify, iTunes, or any major podcast platforms. And yeah, that's kind of everything. Yeah, and just on my personal page, I suppose that's where I update the most and do the most vlogging, as it were.
And what's your Instagram personal page, like your at?
It's just my name, at Lydia Des Dolles.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking time to do this. I couldn't do interviews if people didn't want to give me their time and stuff. So I'm very appreciative of it. And I really appreciate being talking to people that are international, that not just located in the U.S. So I'm really grateful that you took the time to do this.
No problem. I appreciate it. And thank you for fitting me in at this time, because I know it's quite early for you guys over there. So.
No, I always get up early, so it's
Okay.
not a problem. All right. Well, talking to you, I mean, I really appreciate the time. It was a great chat, and I hope to catch up with you soon some other time. I know you're busy.
I am, but I'll always have time for you, Todd. Don't worry about that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and have a great day. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.